Hi everyone, welcome to Itsy Bitsy's live read from Humiliating Revenge by T. Christensen. Chapter 1. Olivia Crawford was blasted with obscenities, yelling, jeering, and cheering as soon as she stepped into the packed arena. Her midnight blue eyes widened and her gut tightened at the pandemonium all around her. Her body stopped and braced itself at the onslaught of unfamiliar sights and offending smells. The guy behind her didn't appreciate her sudden stop. "What the fuck? Move your ass!" The snarled command and the beer being absorbed by the back of her Chardonnay shirt dress got her feet moving hastily to the top of the arena. She didn't look back, but kept both ears alerted to the sounds behind her. When she didn't hear any footsteps or obscenities following her, she took a deep breath to try and calm her erratic heart and frantic breathing. The dim lights made it difficult to see the row numbers, so Olivia had to squint and bend to find her nosebleed seat. She found her row and shimmied her way to the plank wood seat and pulled it down. Keeping her elbows off the shared armrest, she hugged her leather purse and studied the fighters in the chain-link cage. They weren't calm, so she turned her attention to the distinctive smell of beer radiating from her. Scooting forward, she reached back and peeled the back of her dress away from her skin as she looked around at the sights and sounds of her first mixed martial arts fight. Well, her first live MMA fight. It was a little different than watching it on the screen of the library computer. The first thing that hit her was the smell of dirty socks and beer. Opening her mouth to breathe, she felt the intensity of the crowd radiating with testosterone. Everyone was either standing or sitting at the edge of their seats, riveted to the action in the cage. Almost all of the men were yelling and coaching the seasoned fighters. Stimulously, shouts of frustrated obscenities and excited cheering erupted at what looked like brutal hits. A fight seemed ready to break out at any moment, and her feet wanted to get up and leave, but she kept them firmly planted. She didn't come this far only to leave before she saw Colum. The rigidness gradually left her when the fight finished. It was like the whole arena took a deep breath and the tension left as soon as the fighters left. Instead of feeling like a riot was about to happen, Olivia could feel and see the relaxed camaraderie. The lights came up and she studied the crowd. As a woman, she was in the minority, and she stuck out like a sore thumb wearing leggings, ankle boots, a dress, and jewelry. Ripped jeans, flip-flops, and tank tops seemed to be the dress code. She breathed a sigh of relief. She was so high up and no one was looking at her. Since she had come from her father's house, her choices had been limited. She thought about changing in the car, but she couldn't think of an explanation of why she would have extra clothes in her car if her father had walked her to her car, which meant he would search her car and find them. There was a mandatory supper every Saturday at her father's house. If she didn't go, Miles Crawford made it a point to intrude even further in her life than he currently did. She tried to see him or talk to him as little as possible. Unfortunately, he did not feel the same. He demanded that he know everything happening in her life. She was going to have to figure out a way to ditch her current clothes before she left the arena, otherwise her car would smell like beer. Her father had given her a brand new white BMW coupe almost 4 years ago for high school graduation. He called it a gift, but in her mind, it was a loaner. The sooner she got rid of it, the sooner he would have no less hold over her. It could not smell like beer when she went to his house tomorrow. The questions that would cause had her breath suspended in her throat. Those questions would be nothing compared to what would happen if Miles Crawford knew she was here at a mixed martial art match. Olivia's hands clung to the edge of her seat, and she swore her back started throbbing exactly where her old wounds had been. His view of wrestling was for blue-collar hillbillies who couldn't afford a real sport. Her brain was telling her to go, but her heart was telling her to stay. Her brain usually won in her internal battles, but this time she wasn't going to let her fear win. She kept her sweaty grip locked on the seat, and her feet glued to the floor. It had been 5 years since she had seen Cullum in person instead of through a screen, and she wasn't going to let her wussiness get in the way. Ever since their high school breakup, she had been a persistent, silent stalker. Olivia had been a junior and Cullum a senior when they broke up. The first year after the breakup, she couldn't get close to Cullum, but had made it a point to keep up with the gossip about him. When she was a senior, Cullum was at college, and it was actually easier to gather information. Thanks to their time together, she knew where the wrestlers hung out. She would slink there and try to make herself invisible to catch any news on Cullum. Olivia was so excited for him when she had scrunched up enough information to realize Cullum had left college and Colorado to help an up-and-coming MMA fighter train. Then she had started stalking him on the internet. It was in her best interest to forget about Cullum, but she couldn't seem to do it. She never uttered his name or asked questions, but with the internet she didn't have to. 6 months after he left college, Cullum was training to become an MMA fighter himself. A little bit of the guilt she would forever possess eased a little bit with every win he had. This was Cullum's first fight in the martial arts first league, the premier league in the MMA, and it was in Denver, a short 30-minute drive from Berlin. She was bursting with excitement for Cullum. He had accomplished so much in the 5 years since he had left. The latest internet stalking she had done said Cullum was staying in Colorado after his premiere. Olivia knew Cullum was close with his family, so she was happy after traveling the world. He was back in Colorado. The article she read didn't say where in Colorado, only indicating it would be his base home. A little more guilt eased when she had read he was returning. Now it was time for her to get on with her life. This match was Olivia's last stalking before she bid Cullum goodbye for good. She had tried over the last 5 years to forget him. Every few months she found herself at the library computers checking on him. She could stop worrying. He was in the big league now, and his name was becoming well known. Olivia was in her 4th year of college and finishing her degree in accounting. Each day she got closer to graduation, the knot of fear in her stomach got a little looser. It was almost time to separate herself from Colorado and her father. She had the education she needed to get a job and not be dependent on anyone but herself. 4 years ago, when she graduated from high school, she had thought about leaving. She ached to, but when she started looking for jobs, finding one that would pay enough for her to live on was bleak, especially since she would have nothing with her. Every towel and dish would need to be bought. Her decision to go into accounting was because she could take it anywhere and use it. Depending on the size of the city, it might be a bookkeeping position, but she could still find a job. The other reason was accountants were high in demand. If she couldn't find a job, even with a college degree, she could still be in the same predicament she was before college. The booming announcer's voice startled her out of her thoughts. Fighting in the blue corner, undefeated, middleweight at 7-0, weighing in at 175 pounds, is Carlos, the truck, Satya. The shouting swelled in the arena as the truck made his way to the cage. This was it. She leaned forward, kept her eyes glued to where the truck had come from. Silently, she willed the crowd to stop yelling, so he would be introduced. Finally, the announcer started talking. Her heart started beating faster, and she stood up to her full 5'6", straining her neck and eyes for the first sight of him. Fighting in the red corner, in his first martial arts first league match at 180 pounds, is Cullum Stoddard Breen. There he was. Olivia pushed to her tiptoes, soaked him in, and felt that ever-present longing in her ease. She tuned out the booze and greedily ran her eyes over him as he made his way to the cage. He was bigger, but there was not an ounce of flab on his body. No matter where you dropped a quarter, it would bounce back. Each muscle was clearly defined and ready to be utilized at a moment's notice. There was a tattoo on his left pec. Olivia squinted her eyes to try and figure out what it was, but he was too far away. She made a mental note to figure out what it was later. A quick scan didn't reveal any other ink. His midnight hair was cut closer to his head, not quite a buzz cut on the sides and longer on the top. A memory skidded through her head, and her body buzzed, remembering the first time she had tentatively reached up and ran her hand through his hair. She had been surprised at how thick and soft it was. Cullum's answering laugh was a far cry from what she was seeing now. There was no showboating for Colin as he made his way to the cage. There was a calm, confident intensity radiating from him. His focus was on the cage and not the screaming crowd. She was as far away from the action as one could be, and it was intimidating. The easygoing charm that first drew her to Colm was nowhere to be seen. When he was wrestling, he would be bouncing with excitement and turn to her and wink before his match. The playfulness, she remembered, was nowhere to be seen. Even in the interview she had read and watched it had not been present. The crowd intensity racketed back up as the two opponents stood in the middle of the cage staring each other down. Carlos Satia was bouncing on his feet, sneering at Cullum. He had a hard time standing still. Cullum was the exact opposite. He stood motionless at his full height of 6'3". Only his eyes moved as he steadily scrutinized his opponent's antics, and then seemed to be dismiss him by calmly turning his back before the words left the referee's lips. A shiver ran through Olivia as she watched the truck's face when Colm effectively dismissed the seasoned fighter. At 26, Carlos had been fighting for 4 years and was undefeated in the MMA League. Olivia didn't think it was a smart idea for Colm to piss off his opponent before the fight began. What did she know? 3 minutes into the third round, Colm won the match. He delivered a jaw-breaking uppercut to the truck. As soon as the truck staggered back, Colm swung around and kicked him in the chest. Colm tracked him around the cage as the truck struggled to get to his feet and stay up. Just as Colm started leaning over the truck, who was on one knee, the referee stopped between them and declared Colm the winner. The crowd was stunned into a momentary silence before it erupted. There was some booing, but most of the outpouring was now congratulatory cheering. Colm calmly strode back to his coach among the chaos and walked out of the arena. Olivia watched him, silently mourning the loss of him with each step taking him out of her sight. She would always feel guilty, but it was time for her life to begin. It was obvious Colm was fine, and he didn't need her to worry about him. It had been worth the risk to come and watch him. The way he had moved during the match had been unbelievably fluid and focused. There hadn't been a sudden catching of his breath or flinch when his opponent struck him. It didn't even look like his breathing was labored, just a stoic man who flawlessly executed a plan. With one last lingering look and a silent goodbye, Olivia knew it was time to figure out how to get rid of her dress. The smell was starting to turn her stomach, and it was drying to her skin. It was a good thing her auburn hair had gathered up in a loose bun, otherwise it would be smelling of beer. She made her way down to the souvenir stands she had passed in the lobby. She knew exactly which Colm Breen t-shirt she was going to buy. Thank you for listening to this portion.